Alright, so if you're looking to get yourself some hollow foil adepts out of Ghost of the Deep, the Rite of the Nine version, I've got a Stormcaller build here for you with a couple of variations to farm this. The way that I farm it is I farm the first encounter on Ultimatum difficulty, and then if I get tired of that, and by the way, when I say first encounter, I just mean the ritual, right? The actual first encounter with the 7-minute timer. You get a guaranteed adept, 4 perks if nobody dies, 3 perks if there's only 1 death. So it's a pretty efficient farm. If you're on a good team, you can get it done in 5 minutes with load screens and everything. You know, on average, you're looking about, you know, an adept every 7 minutes or so. That's my preferred way to do it, but it does get boring, right? When you're doing the same thing every 5-7 minutes, you know, I mean, depends what your threshold is for boredom. For me, I could probably do it for maybe an hour, and then I'm itching to get into something else. So the way that I can take a break from the farm and just still farm Ghost of the Deep is I just switch to Eternity mode. I use basically the exact same build, which I will go over, and I just do full clears, start to finish. I already know that I can solo the dungeon. In fact, I've solo flawlessed it, as is indicated by my emblem here. A long time ago, almost 2 years ago now. So in that case, on Eternity mode, it's actually easier than the normal dungeon. And so that means that basically you can just create random fire teams, put it on auto join, just run it with no mic, start to finish. I usually get it done within half an hour. You don't get as many adept weapons, obviously, but you do get a lot of the currency, which you can take back to the emissary in the Rite of the Nine public space, or whatever you want to call it. And you can certainly get yourself some adepts via luck through that chest, but generally out of the dungeon on Eternity, you're not really getting adepts. But you do get a ton of weapons, which means that you have an increased chance of getting hollow foil weapons. Shinies, right? Which is kind of cool. Even if it's not adept, it doesn't really matter, right? But the point is that I wanted to come up with basically one core build, meaning you know, abilities, aspects, that kind of stuff, so that if I were to change up my farm, change between Ultimatum first encounter and full clears, I'm basically just still using the exact same build, right? I have one swap that I will go over. By the way, there's going to be timestamps in this video, so if you don't have the patience to listen to me yap through most of this unedited gameplay, I believe it's all unedited. I have the first encounter here on Ultimatum, so the gameplay you're watching right now is on Ultimatum, one of my more decent runs. And then if you want, you can just skip forward to the full Eternal Clear. But the full Eternal Clear, I'm not showing you a full half hour of gameplay. You don't need to see that. I'm going to show you, since you've already seen the first encounter here on Ultimatum difficulty, it goes without saying that you could definitely do the same thing on Eternity with ease, so I'm not going to break down separate builds for Ultimatum and Eternity for the first encounter. It doesn't really matter, right? Just use this build right here, right, which I will go over. But the build for Ecthar and Simmumah is identical for the purpose of simplicity, for the purpose of, well, I guess for you as well. If you're watching this video and you're looking for a build and something simple to use, then you know, it'll be in here. So you can look for the timestamps to get to basically a full phase, if not the full clear of Ecthar and the full clear of Simmumah. I think I had a one-phase clip of Simmumah, so it's only, you know, 7 minutes of gameplay or something like that. And Ecthar was a 2-phase, although I have managed to pull off a 1-phase on Ecthar with this build as well. Although I didn't capture the footage, but nonetheless, everything is, you know, I'm gonna give you gameplay. Okay. And by the way, if you want me to keep giving you gameplay, well, go ahead and leave a comment. How about, right? I'm not even gonna ask for a like or a sub or anything like that. Just leave me a comment so we can have a chat. And oftentimes, what is said in the comment sections and the discussions that are had there often inspire me to make more vids, right? So I haven't been putting out a ton of content lately as regularly as I have over the past couple years. It's kind of slowed down since Heresy, I guess you can say, a little bit, and it's nothing to do with the game. I'm still playing the game pretty much as daily, pretty much as often as I was before, but I've had a lot of stuff going on, so it's been hard for me to sit down and make content, as this is, you know, this is a hobby. Anyways, I better get to the build here because I'm halfway through the Ultimatum farm gameplay. I'm on Stormcaller. The reason being is that Arc Soul does a very good job at eliminating the moths passively. You know, you don't have to really aim and shoot, although you still should. You should still look for the moths and at least point in their direction so that your Arc Soul, because your Arc Soul isn't going to protect you 100%, right? It's not like the Arc Soul doesn't have its head on a 360 swivel looking for all the moths and deleting them, right? It's still going to shoot in the direction that you're aiming, right? So it's going to help you shoot at the enemies that you're shooting. It's going to help you shoot at moths if you're looking at them, right? Still, nonetheless, it can save your hide because moths are usually the main cause of death, especially in this first encounter on Ultimatum, right? Also, Stormcaller gives us easy access to Amplified, right? Which means we have a speed booster. We're on a timer. That's very handy, right? We've also got blind and bolt charge, so it means that we can just spam crowd control and add clear at the same time via our Ionic Sentry, which does blind and does build up tons of bolt charge, right? Spark of beacons with our arc special weapon here and our arc heavy weapon. So whether I'm using this thing or my sword, I am blinding all the enemies that I kill, which is insane for survivability. And then, of course, we've got the crazy Heresy artifact mods, just making all of this arc stuff that much better, right? Okay, so the build that I'm using here is the exact same build that I use pre-damage in Eternal mode to farm a full clear, right? So obviously I'm going to use the same build for Eternity on this encounter, but even on Ecthar, obviously I'm just going to switch my weapons to a damage heavy, which I'll get into, but I'm going to use the same pre-damage build, which is Getaway Artist, right? And so this may be a little bit redundant for people that have watched my channel over Heresy, but I think the first video I put out this season was this build, right? So if you want more detail on the build, if I don't cover everything for you that you need here, you can just go back to just check my channel and look for the 3 aspects 2 turrets build on Stormcaller earlier in the season. But the concept here is that you can have an Arc Soul, you can have an Ionic Sentry, and you can still have kind of the core identity of Stormcaller, in my opinion, which is Electrostatic Mine. Getting Ionic traces, becoming amplified from those traces, from basically anything, right? Killing Arc debuffed enemies, killing enemies with Arc abilities themselves, right? You get so many Ionic traces, it saves you on fragments because you don't have to use things like Spark of Ions, etc. Right, so the way that I could do that is just run for my aspects, Ionic Sentry, Electrostatic Mine, and Getaway Artist to get the Arc Soul, right, and to get on-demand amplified, right, which does make it a little bit unique. If you're in a fire team, obviously it's more enticing to use the actual Arc Soul aspect because then you can feed all of your teammates Arc Souls as well, right? So here I'm just showing you the build for Eternity, Ecthar, right? And I use the exact same loadout, same weapons on Simmumah. It's not that it's even necessarily 100% optimized, but like I said, I've pulled off a LFG no mic 1 phase with this build for both bosses, for Ecthar and Simmumah, so it does just fine. And the reason for it is because Thunderlord and Ionic Sentry, and then, you know, pair that with a Titan with a Stormskeep Barricade on your team, you're basically just gonna bolt charge the shit out of the bosses, right? Like, even if you're not landing all your crits, it's just putting out so much damage from the bolt charge, right? So outside of this season, it's not like Thunderlord is necessarily king or anything like that. And in fact, if you want, for Ecthar, you could easily swap it out for something like Legend of Acryus, maybe get a bit more DPS, but you are definitely going to get more bolt charge discharges by using Thunderlord in combination with Ionic Sentry, right? The only other thing that I change here between Eternity and Ultimatum First Encounter farming is obviously I'm using Chaos Reach with Geomags for damage phase, right? Which means that on the Getaway Artist build for pre-damage that I'm using here, I'm also using Chaos Reach, right? Storm Trance is just better for the first encounter on Ultimatum, in my opinion, because there's, you know, you can dunk the symbols, you can reveal the deep sight in Ultimatum, safely, but if you've popped your super, right, because you've got that roaming super damage resistance, and then you can clear out the entire middle spawn, right? You have 3 spawns of enemies between each symbol, and so I'm talking about the wizard spawn where you get like 4 orange barred wizards and then a whole bunch of orange barred acolytes, right? That is the most lethal spawn outside of like the light bearer that gives you the symbol or the vestige, right? So that's a good. You can pop your super whenever it makes sense for you and whenever based on like when your teammates might be popping their supers as well, right? So if you've already seen that your Titans T-crashed on the wizard spawn, then you're probably safe to pop your super on to reveal deep sight or to grab the vestige, kill the light bearer, right? So you just time it accordingly so that you guys aren't wasting 2 supers for 1 spawn of enemies, right? Right, so here I've swapped over to Geomags, and then if you'll notice, before I came to damage phase, I tried to get my Arc Soul up, because you will maintain your Arc Soul despite switching over to Geomags and not having Getaway Artist. And I also try to get the Ionic Sentry on the ground near the boss, right before we start damage too, because that's going to give you all those bolt charge procs, right? So this in combination with like Limit Break from the seasonal artifact, and then I think it's Heavy Ordnance, right? So if you're using Thunderlord, you're using, I think it's called Heavy Ordnance, which gives you damage resistance while using a machine gun, right? So you're doing sustained damage with Thunderlord, you get damage resistance, right? Which is pretty key because Ecthar is a pretty lethal boss, even on Eternity, definitely on normal mode, and most certainly on Ultimatum. So yeah, if you're going Thunderlord, go with Heavy Ordnance for the DR. If you're using Queen Breaker, obviously you're going to go with Particle Reconstruction or whatever it's called, right, to get the essentially the extra 15 or whatever. It's a weakening effect that you get from linears, right? So use what makes sense. So anyways, this gameplay is going to serve as background gameplay, not necessarily going to line up with the narrative here, but I didn't really go over the weapons from the first encounter farm on Ultimatum difficulty, so I'm going to do that here, and you can just watch this gameplay in the meantime, right? But yeah, I was using, for my loadout for Ultimatum first encounter, Kvostov with Forbearance and my Eager Edge Sword. Is it the other half or half truce? I can never remember which one is which, but the Arc version. But Kvostov, just because I think, well, I wanted to run Forbearance as my main bread and butter, add clear, crowd control kit, right? And healing, right? Because I've got Unrelenting on this and Soul Drinker, right? So obviously the OG Forbearance has Soul Drinker, which means that you can heal on reload based on number of hits that you get before you reload, right? Or I should say, you can pair that with Unrelenting so that when you, if you kill 1 orange bar, you get guaranteed healing from Unrelenting. Yellow bars, obviously, same thing. So kill chunky enemies with Unrelenting, get guaranteed healing, or get multi-kills on red bars, which is absolutely no problem at all with Forbearance, and you get heals, right? So you get heals pre-reload, and you get heals on reload with Forbearance with Unrelenting and Soul Drinker, this is actually what I used for my solo Flawless Clear 2 years ago, right? And I know a lot of people have said, Forbearance has gone by the wayside, Waveframe GLs with it, a chain reaction not as viable as they used to because they saw like a 5% or a 10% nerf or something like that, and then we got Rocket Sidearms. So, it just kind of fell by the wayside, but I still think that Waveframe GLs, especially in light of the Rocket Sidearm nerf that we got, what was it, at the start of Heresy, to me, they've crept right back up in there for ad clear, if not better. I think they're better for ad clear given the right scenario. If you have the proper terrain, right? Obviously, if you've got like if there's a lot of different levels to the terrain, then sometimes the waveframe can get interrupted. But Ghost is pretty straightforward, and Forbearance is going to work on pretty much all the time. So Forbearance is your bread and butter utility, right, for the build. Which means that for the first encounter, I'm going to be using my Eager Edge Sword with it. which means I have room for an exotic in my first slot. So that's how I ended up on Kvostov. Also, if you get a Storm's Keep Titan on your team, Kvostov is really nice to post up behind the barricade because it has a high rate of fire as well. And with its special 7th bullet ricochet thing, I think you get a lot of bolt charge procs from Kvostov. It definitely feels like it, so that's what worked for me. But you can obviously go with whatever you want for an exotic primary, or you can go double special. I mean, it's pretty easy to come by special, but in that case, if you're using a wave frame GL and you want to go with a special weapon in your first slot, it's pretty much got to be a trace, because otherwise how are you going to shoot the moths, right? And I know we've got the Arc Soul, but you're not going to have 24/7 uptime with your Arc Soul. And like I said, the Arc Soul isn't shooting everything that's behind you into the side of you. It's shooting in the direction that you're looking. So then when we switch to Ecthar and Simmumah, you'll notice that I've got, because I'm using an exotic heavy in Thunderlord, I want to use a primary that fulfills, a similar role to Kvostov, which is multi-mock, right? I have a high rate of fire primary weapon. It's reliable to take care of all of the moss, and the fact that this thing has kinetic tremors and attrition orbs basically almost makes it an exotic anyways, right? So just run multi-mock in place of an exotic primary, right? If you're going to use Thunderlord or Queenbreaker. Okay, so for the aspects and abilities that I use here throughout, right, we've got Spark of... well, first the aspects, we've got Electrostatic Mine and Ionic Sentry. Like I said, the Arc Soul is just coming from Getaway Artist, and that's it. So the rest of the time, we're just getting traces from everything, from Electrostatic Mine, and we're throwing out the Sentries. Those are our aspects. The fragments that I'm using here, Spark of Resistance is absolutely key, right? We're not on Prismatic we don't have 5 stacks of Frost Armor, Woven Mail, Amplified, Avoid Overshield, right? We really have to min-max our DR, our damage resist, on a core subclass like this. So we use Spark of Resistance, we make sure we're amplified, and we make sure that we jolt the enemy, right? Because when you exhaust the enemy via jolt, then you reduce their damage output, right? Regardless of the artifact is enhancing a lot of this stuff, right? I think you get like almost double the DR from exhausting enemies, right? Or you reduce their damage output by almost double compared to normal, right? But we have 3 core means on Stormcaller of getting damage resist without the artifact, right? So we're just using the artifact to complement it, but make sure that we have our core build set up right with the aspect. So Spark Resistance, right? Then, because we're on Ionic Sentry and we're using Thunderlord, why not double the amount of bolt charge procs that we can get via Spark of Frequency, right? Every time we get bolt charge, we get twice as much. So, super important. Spark of Discharge, also very good, right? Because we're making so many Ionic Traces, it means that every time we get a trace from Spark of Discharge, and I don't just mean by killing enemies with arc weapons, right? So Spark of Discharge has 2 functions. One, it gives you Ionic traces for getting arc weapon kills, right? So Forbearance is giving me traces from Discharge, but Electrostatic Mind is also shitting out Ionic traces everywhere, right? And so the second paragraph of Spark of Discharge is collecting an Ionic trace, period, right? Grants you a stack of bolt charge. So it doesn't matter where the Ionic trace is from, right? Whether it's from Discharge or from Electrostatic Mine or from the seasonal artifact, any type of trace, you pick it up, you get bolt charge, right? So this is how you maximize the amount of bolt charge that you can get on Stormcaller. So we've maximized our DR, we've maximized our bolt charge, right? Then for the 4th and final fragment, I'm using Spark of Beacons, right? Like I mentioned there, you get Arc Special Weapon or Power Weapon kills, and you blind enemies, right? You do have to be amplified first, but I mean, it only takes 1 kill with Forbearance to get amplified, because you get an Arc multi-kill, you're amplified, right? Or you just pick up a trace, thanks to Electrostatic Mine, you're amplified. Or you consume your Flashbang Grenade and turn it into an Arc Soul, and you're amplified, right? So Spark of Beacons is basically has constant uptime, right? and it's giving you that crowd control, which just makes it so good. So, couple things here that you may think are missing from the build, right? You hear me say flashbang grenade. Well, the reason I'm using a flashbang grenade instead of a pulse grenade, right? You might think, well, I should be using a pulse grenade. It's the best arc grenade on any arc build, right? So that's missing. Also, Spark of Shock is missing, right? So my grenades aren't jolting, right? So two things that are almost always on all core arc builds: pulse grenades, Spark of Shock, right? You jolt, you overload, etc. You do more damage. The reason I'm using flashbang grenade here is because I'm always consuming it with Getaway Artist to turn it into my Arc Soul, right? And it doesn't stack with Spark of Shock. Your Arc Soul is never going to jolt from the fragment, so you don't need the fragment. So you save, you get a faster cooldown on a flashbang grenade, and you save a fragment slot, right? And that's basically it for the aspects of fragments. So then the only other thing here that you really need to consider is just your swap builds for Eternity. If you're fighting Ecthar and Simmumah like I am here, then you want to make sure that on your pre-damage build you've just got some function for armor charge, so like special finisher, and then for damage you have surges on your legs, right? You just swap out this finisher mod for time dilation and you just go to town with arc damage, right? So there's one phase. That's how I've been farming Ghosts of the Deep during Rite of the Nine, getting the god rolls, getting the holofoils. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.